America getting upset about the deep state far more than here. I don't see people.
Well, to be fair, it only came out today. I mean, the whistleblower only wrote today. Well, I think people on either side of this debate, wherever you stand on what should happen with Rwanda with the flights, should be equally outraged about the notion of Home Office staff members just effectively undermining what they're told to do by the government. That should offend everyone, irrespective of your point of view.
You know what? That's such a British concept. Is like there are forces working behind the scenes. There might be forces working behind the scenes, but why isn't Rishi Sunak last year when he came into power saying there are why isn't there a Donald Trump here saying there are forces working behind the scenes?
No, it's actually not a bad question. I'm not so sure about the comparison with Donald Trump, but they've been promising a bonfire of the Quangos for years. They've been promising to clean up the civil service, and now that it has been so captured, as you say, Nick, now would be the time to do it.
Because Rishi Sunak is captured.
Yeah, well, that's true. But also, Dominic Cummings just released a 2.5-hour podcast. I'm only like partway through it. But one thing he points out is it's very hard to get rid of these people. Because if you're a sort of normal minister, you can get rid of the 3 people that you've hired. The only person that has more power than that is the Prime Minister themselves. But then they just have so many people to sack that it's so hard to do. And the one time he said they did it with Boris, everyone talked about it being a coup and they were just getting rid of some old duffers. So it's basically incredibly hard to sack people because only the PM has that technical power and they just don't have time and resources to do it all.
OK, well, very interesting. We're going to move on to Thursday's Guardian. Nick, what are The Guardian leading with?
So, of course, they got Rwanda, but they've also got 8 MPs exit Labour front bench over Gaza ceasefire. This was, of course, the vote you alluded to before, which wanted to call explicitly for a ceasefire. 56 Labour MPs voted for it with the SNP. Madness, really. Jess Phillips has therefore resigned. So has Afzal Khan, Yasmin Qureshi, Paul Barker, Sarah Owen, Naz Shah, and Andy Slaughter, ironically named perhaps, but depending on where you stand. But what were you going to say?
Well, I want to put this to you, Nick, and I'm not expecting you to solve the crisis in the Middle East. But what I am putting to you is, obviously, a lot of people are upset on an emotional level whenever people are dying. So that explains this from an emotive point of view. But what is Israel meant to do, insofar as they cannot possibly coexist with Hamas, a terrorist group living next door that has vowed to repeat this action again and again and again until Jews are wiped out? So it's not an option to leave Hamas where they are. So a ceasefire, there was a ceasefire before October the 7th. It was Hamas who broke it. They don't really have a choice, do they?
Well, I agree with you, Andrew, but many people in the Labour Party don't. Let's remember this is a party that was led until recently by Jeremy Corbyn, who refused repeatedly to say that Hamas were a terror group with Piers Morgan the other night.
That was shocking, actually.
And you might say, look, there's a humanitarian angle. OK, fine. But is it that or is it ideological? Because when you have people like Naz Shah, remember, she was suspended for 3 months for saying that Israel should move to the US in a post. And amazingly, she's still in the party. So these are people who don't like Israel. So there's lots of humanitarian crises we could look at throughout the world, but they seem particularly focused on this one.
What do you think about this, Lewis? I mean, am I wrong to say that Israel doesn't have a choice but to insist? Before a ceasefire, they would have to insist, surely, that Hamas is disbanded and that the hostages are returned. At a sort of base level, they would have to have that.
I would say that. If people don't see that, then what can I do about it? What can we do about it? People out there don't see it. There's 250 hostages in basements underneath the hospital there. Do people see it? I don't know. First of all, I don't know. We don't get enough public opinion polls in this country. Our political parties are not strong enough to... This could be the best thing that happened to this country, because Labour should do what it wants to do, which could be a pro-Palestinian party. And,
Labour, I think, would never be that simplistic insofar as there are always 2 parties in one.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly this story is talking about Labour frontbenchers resigning over this, right? So clearly there's a split.
Well, then, if Labour is 2 parties in one, the other party, what's the name of the other
Conservative.
party? Conservative Party will...
I told you to do your research before coming on the show.
I'd just forgotten, because you don't hear from these people. And the Conservative Party, if people have a choice today in the country, they should have a choice. They should have a party that stands for Palestinians and terrorism, or a party that stands for...
Lewis, I'm not so sure that that's right.
How about this? How about I backtrack a bit? I'm in favor... I'm not saying that they're not all terrorists, but I'm in favor of a ceasefire between the Palestinians, the pro-Palestinian people who are having a revolt against our country, and the other people living.
OK, there we go. Lewis has solved the problem. We're going to move on now to the Mirror. What's going on? Front cover of the Mirror. Anyone got this?
Oh,
Lewis,
I got this one. Yeah, this one is something new. This one is another Meghan and Harry, whoever that guy is, and it says there's nothing sacred. Outrage as Harry and Meghan book reveals details around the Queen's death. So I thought,
it's another book.
It's another book.
We really have to deal with another book.
And I thought that they wrote the book, but they didn't write the book.
No, of course they didn't. There's a ghostwriter.
No, not even a ghostwriter.
No?
This is another book written by this guy Omid Scobie.
Yes.
In a book called Endgame, which has just been released, or parts of it have been released, that say the belief that he's been briefed by Meghan and that Harry and probably Harry.
What's the fury, though? I mean, if it's a book by some guy's written a book about the royal family,
it's about the Queen's death. It's like what happened at the Queen's death.
Nick, is that off limits?
Yeah, it is. It's the lack of decorum, and it is the era of decorum represented by our beloved late Queen, and the era of oversharing represented by Harry and Meghan.
But this isn't a book by Harry and Meghan.
Oh, it's about them. So it was very hard to read the writing on the front page.
Yeah.
Okay. And I zone out when Lewis talks. So yeah. But in general, it's what I said. But the story I'm more interested in is David Seaman and the goal he couldn't get over, which I presumably is the one against Brazil with Ronaldinho, and that's more interesting to me.
Oh, okay. I didn't know what that meant.
Thank you. You know what that's called? That's called diversion. That's called diversion. You're basically saying this is a non-story.
It's a non-story.
It's a non-story. There we go. Well, there's the front page. Is fully disseminated. Coming up, we've got Rwanda replacements, happy Chinese, and welcome back to Spain. Sounds a bit cryptic. Find out after the break.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GBNews.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Thursday's newspapers. I'm Andrew Doyle, and because they didn't have an argument in the break, I'm still joined by Lewis Schaefer and Nick Dixon. Well done for keeping it cool, guys. We're going to move on to Thursday's Telegraph next. Nick, how confident are you in this story?
I'm very confident. It's Rishi Sunak faces 6 more no-confidence letters, and Dame Andrea Jenkins is saying that he's got to go. You may have seen her very amusing letter, which I thought was a parody at first because it was so aggressive and used certain words I'm not even sure I can say on Headliners. But it was real. So she's saying people, it's time to go, even though they'll look stupid because they've got rid of so many leaders. I think it's a bad idea because if we suddenly were to bring in a Suella type, an actual Conservative, just before this election, then they lose. You can pin everything on that. So it's much better, from my perspective, to let Sunak tank than actually change the party.
Yes, whoever's going to lead the Tory party into the next election is going to lose, presumably. Then someone else, it's going to be whoever comes next that's going to be the successor. Lewis, this goes back to this, Nick thinks it's Farage. We're going back to this point about the Tory party not being Conservative enough, you know. Suella Braverman, the departure of Suella Braverman does feel very much to a lot of people like the sort of dying remnants of the Conservative element of the Conservative Party. Do you think this is right?
It's the other way around. She's not the dying remnant. She's like the spark of the party, I believe. It's like Nick used a very interesting way of calling it. Call it National Conservative, Nat
Cons versus the Libs.
It isn't like Hitler, it's like National Socialist.
It's National Conservative, yeah. It's what a lot of people are calling it now, like the NatCon conference versus the kind of basically old school Lib Dems who are the rest of the pie. That is Steve Davis wrote a brilliant article in the Telegraph. This is the civil war in the Tories.
How's it going to go though, Nick? That's what I'm interested in. You know, these no confidence letters, will they do anything? Surely they know that
these won't. But long term, how it's going to go is the party either is captured by one side or the other, or it breaks up.
Yes.
I obviously think the NatCons will probably win it, and then there is an in-between position. Though Davis in his piece said this has no hope. But that's that you're Thatcherite on economics, but you're socially conservative, and that would work with tough border controls. You could do that, but he thinks that's got no future. He thinks you have to pick between more interventionist, anti-immigration, social conservative, and the more what Eric Kaufman calls the business liberals.
Sounds good to me. You should run, Lewis. You should be a politician.
You know what? I think Nick is wrong. I think there's only one issue.
Go on.
Which is
sugar.
No. Well, that's actually deeply involved.
The deep state.
But it's about who is fighting for Britain. And it's not about the British economic policy. I think the people could settle at this time for bad economics if they had their country. And I think they're...
So you're calling for more patriotism from whoever's going to be the leader?
More patriotism.
That is the NatCon side, though.
Is it?
See, I think Farage can bridge the gap, because even though he is liberal economically, but then he's very known as sort of sovereignty and anti-immigration. So I think someone like him can do it.
And you think that he would be elected leader?
I think he will, will. I've predicted 2029 Farage becomes Prime Minister.
But what I mean is, will the party membership go?
Oh, yeah, they will. After Sunak gets destroyed, they'll have to.
Very interesting. OK, we're going to move on to The Guardian now. And Lewis, seems like David Cameron has a lot of fans in China.
In China, yeah. He doesn't have many in this country, I don't think so. Concerns as China welcomes David Cameron's return as foreign secretary in the big shakeup. And it's said that the Chinese state media, the Global Times tabloid, and it's all state propaganda. That's what the Chinese is. And when you think of state propaganda, a lot of people don't sort of understand how the Chinese state propaganda works. Just think of the BBC here.
Lewis Schaefer, for goodness sake.
Yeah, well, I believe it anyway. So they
You'll start going on about social credit systems in a minute.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's what's heading. We're heading towards all this thing. And this is the policy of Xi.
Are you happy about David Cameron's return, Nick? I know you were looking forward to it.
Lol. It's absolutely ridiculous. But and this is a big red flag, pun intended. And quite a good pun, actually.
Quite a good pun. Deserved more.
Thank you. But at home, they'll get that later. But, yeah, I mean, look, we've had this, aside from China's humanitarian abuses, which no one seems to care about unless it's Israel, human rights abuses. Also, we've been naive about this sort of soft war with China. Cameron's a big part of that. He's always trying to get trade deals and all these things from the Sri Lanka project, the Chinese investment in that. And he's known for that. So, of course, it's always a red flag when China's like, we love this guy. That's a problem on its own. And, of course, he's in line with Blair, who's been over doing these meetings and saying Labour's going to be more in line with the Chinese. Of course, because Cameron's the heir to Blair. So
Isn't it so weird to see Cameron back there? Because he'd really hidden himself away
on a pig farm
after Brexit. I'm not even talking about the pig scandal.
No, he was on a pig farm in Suffolk.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
He was doing piggery.
Let's not go into rake over that old muck. But it is interesting, because after Brexit, after that did not go his way. away, he really did basically become a hermit. No one knew what he was doing, where he was doing
Right,
it.
well, maybe he was...
Except for Greensill.
Yeah, keeping his... It's been a long time. But like what you said about, like, it's bad when the Chinese people like him.
Yes.
We don't want our guy to be liked by the Chinese.
No.
It reminds you when Bill Clinton in, like, 1998 or something went in front of the United Nations. He got a standing ovation in front of the United Nations. And Americans were... most Americans, I was sickened by it.
Really?
Because you don't want all these horrible countries around the world liking Bill Clinton, like Britain.
I would add China's probably a very lovely country. I mean, I've never been, but there's some very beautiful.
No, it is beautiful. But the other side of it is,
bad leadership.
is that China, from what I know, and this is just me, I've heard they're in a very weak position demographically, politically, economically, that if trade dries up like we stopped Russia from trading, they will die.
Right.
They've got nothing.
And that's why Trump was much better, because he was tough on trade with China, and they were scared.
And they were scared because they only have trade.
I mean, I was a bit scared of him, but for different reasons. OK, we're going to move on now. Let's have a look at the Mail now. Holiday homes in Spain. Nick, you've got one of those.
Yeah, 2 actually, and it's a new visa joy for Brits with holiday homes as Spain joins France in calling for the post-Brexit 90-day visa limit to be axed, admitting it's harming their economy. Not the most catchy headline, but I've read it all. And this is, you're going to be able to... The rule was you could only stay for 90 out of every 180 days.
So basically, post-Brexit, if you had a holiday home, you had to apply for visas to stay there long term.
To stay for 6 months if you're going to stay. It's just sort of red tape annoying. It's not what Brexit was about. It was about keeping foreigners out of our country. It wasn't about not going to holiday home.
Yeah.
For goodness sake. It's about blue passports and you know it.
Yes, you're right.
No, Lewis, but the thing about this is, they're talking about how if they want to override this policy, they're going to have to go to the EU. The EU is going to have to greenlight this. That's not going to happen because the EU is basically trying to punish Britain and anyone who even has overtures in that direction in terms of getting out of the EU. They're going to punish...
When you deny... You're basically denying tourism, and tourism is the easiest money spinner for any country.
Well, yeah, that's it.
And those British people that wanted to spend more time in Europe, what were they spending?
Of course, Spain and France aren't happy about that. They want them.
It's massive for Spain. Where Brits are double the amount of German tourists. We give them all their money, basically.
Yeah.
Right, and they're spending money.
More and more I read about this stuff, it makes me think it was the right decision to get out of the EU. I just think they're petulant.
Yeah, but you know what the thing is? That's why you need a calendar when you're traveling overseas to see how many days. You can only spend 90 days.
Lewis, I'm going to put a stop to this.
So you
are constantly advertising your calendar.
Because it's a great... And you're in the calendar
EU
as well.
Wouldn't allow this.
Is this a 2023 calendar? There's only 1 month left.
No, this is the 2024. Let me find your picture in it.
I can't believe this.
We all need calendars to compete with this.
You need calendars.
I think we should do a headliner's calendar.
Yes, just without Lewis on.
But without Lewis. 1 month with you, one with me, one with Leo, one with Josh.
Here, you're in there. There's a picture. There's a picture of you, Andrew. Look at how great you look. Can you see how great Andrew looks?
That's lovely. But there's also a picture of Lewis pole dancing for me, which nobody needs to see, let alone our viewers. OK, we're going to move on now to the Telegraph. Some advice from royalty about how to get nannies to raise your kids.
Oh, my God. Yeah, this is the question. It's a Princess of Wales, who was Caroline.
Catherine.
I told you to do your research, Lewis.
No, you know what? I hate the royal family. I'm sorry. I know these people. They love the worst thing about this country is the royal family. I know.
GBNews.
I don't care, but they don't care about this country. They're a bunch of...
You don't know them, Lewis. You're making huge assumptions here.
I don't know them, but these people think that they do. What Princess Louis' feelings wheel taught me about mental health. She's doing this thing she's got a royal foundation, which is this Centre for Early Childhood in London, and she just seems like she's busy doing something, and just I guess to show that there's women involved because there's now 3 generations.
You haven't really described the story, Lewis. Can I just say what happened here is that the prince brought home a what was it called? A feelings wheel,
right?
Which is from a lesson at school where the children are encouraged to make a wheel of their feet. It's about mental health. So Nick, and she says we've got something to learn from this.
Yeah. Firstly, we all love the Princess of Wales, except the immigrants on the show. I just want to make that clear to our viewers. We love the Princess of Wales, and also, this does, though, sound a little bit more like Harry's kind of thing. It's a bit mental healthy. But I do think kids do need this kind of thing. They do need to talk and get their feelings out. Not men. We should never make men try and talk about their feelings like women. But children, that's different.
But boys as well, presumably.
Yeah, I think it's OK for children.
Is it?
Yeah.
But what's the age point where you have to man up and stop having feelings?
Great point.
Like 3.
3. I'm very emotional, though, even now. Is that too late? Is it too late for me?
It's too late for you, Andrew.
That's very, very gay.
I was worried you hadn't offended the gays, and you've offended now everyone.
Everyone, royal family, homosexuals,
women, children, gays.
You are on a roll, Louis Schaefer.
She's pretending to do something. That's what the royal family do.
Nice.
They pretend. She's nice. I'm not saying she's not nice, and she's probably the best mother of the entire bunch. But you know what? That's not saying very much, because that family has the worst mothers. The worst.
I'm going to put a stop to this.
Hannah was a great mother.
We have made it halfway through now. You will be rewarded if you come back with another BBC Israel apology, some Tory knee-taking, and the translator that could start wars. See you in 2.
I went to.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners, getting straight into Thursday's Telegraph now. And the BBC have outdone themselves this time, Nick.
Yeah, this is shocking. Board of Deputies appalled by BBC's newsreaders. I got put off there by Lewis picking up his own name. By BBC newsreaders claim that IDF is targeting medics. So this was a shocking clip. It comes from Monica Miller, who was broadcasting on, I think, BBC World, and twice mistakenly claimed that Israeli forces were targeting medical staff and Arab speakers.
Targeting was the word,
at Gaza's largest hospital. And in fact, the IDF were bringing along medical teams to make sure that harm was minimised. So really the exact
And they were bringing along
opposite.
Arab speakers. So
yes.
Not targeting Arab speakers, bringing Arab speakers.
To prepare for the sensitive environment and translating and so on. So, you know, this is shocking. I mean, we've had a lot of BBC cuts. There's been the merging of these departments and all this. And look, it's live TV. I watched the clip. She seemed like she was speaking in a foreign language and she read out the wrong thing. So it can happen. But given the obvious bias that we've seen of the BBC in recent weeks, it looks very bad.
It looks very bad. I mean, she was reading the auto cue. So I think the fault here will have lied with whoever prepared that, put it on the screen you don't know what she was thinking while she was reading, because I think that is so far off the mark. And if you would have just read that, you would have thought to yourself, hang on, that doesn't sound right. Let's go and check that.
Yeah, or she was looking down, but it would have been in her ear, one of the two, and she's just repeating it.
But the point is that no one...
It's like us, we just repeat stuff they tell us to say.
Exactly, we are puppets of a broader deep state thing. But the thing is, Lewis, it's weird, like, that no one had checked this at any level, because to get to the point where the newscaster is reading it, it's been through a few stages already, hasn't it?
I don't know how they work. They've got probably 1 billion people there, and they probably have somebody to check. The truth is, the BBC is not the truth. We can't trust the truth. Is this the only time this has happened? If this is the only time this has happened, but it isn't. Is that we live in a world of fake reality brought to us by the state propaganda service and policed by Ofcom. And I think people, I'm sorry.
So you think that this is a deliberate misrepresentation of the truth rather than just a major error?
You know what? It happens too often. It might be.
Well, this kind of thing doesn't happen often. I mean, this is very.
This is an error, but in the context of an obvious bias, and in the BBC refusing to call Hamas terrorists.
Well, I suppose that's the point. Is the fact that no one thought, hang on, we should check that, it sounds dodgy, suggests a bias at least, doesn't it?
One thing, though, you can tell even the BBC thought this was bad because they issued a very rare apology, and they hate apologising.
Well, I mean, look, they were right to apologise.
Well, they had to apologise, but even they recognised this was too far and a mistake.
All right, well, let's move on to this story. This is the Mail now. Lewis, you've taken the knee before, but that was when you proposed. Wasn't it?
To you.
That's right, and I said no when you were devastated, but I did give you a job.
That's why he's been so homophobic.
I am not. No. I'm not gay in the UK. I've set my limits.
What's the story, Lewis?
The story is Tory Wright. The Tory sounds like a good name for a daughter. It's like Tory Wright. I like that name, Tory Wright. Tory Wright Fury, as new Home Office Minister Laura Farage is seen taking the knee to quote unquote show her support, quote, well, whatever, for Black Lives Matter.
This was a while ago. It was an unearthed photo.
It was, but this Lucy Farage is the MP, the Conservative MP for Newbury, which is up the road, which is a lovely town. I actually spent the weekend there. It was fantastic. And, or did I? No, I went to visit there with Tony.
Let's get the details
of that. Sorry, I got diverted. And she's a supporter of Rishi, and she's the Home Office Minister.
OK, but isn't it the case, Nick?
Can I finish my point?
Well, was it going to be a good point?
It is going to be a good point.
All right, well, it better be.
Because the reason why this is news is because she's a Tory.
No, but Nick, my point was going to be that, back in the day, in the summer of 2020, when all of these politicians and various personalities were taking the knee, very few people understood the implications, right? Very few people. So could it not just be the case that she was doing it because she felt she had to do it without realising that Black Lives Matter is a Marxist organisation that supports terrorists?
Yes, but it's no excuse, because I knew in 2020 I never posted the black square. I was writing articles in Spiked. In 2020, you can check saying BLM shouldn't be in football, telling people what they were. Now, if a mere layman like me can do it, then a professional politician shouldn't be literally kneeling to this. I mean, they're against the nuclear family, they're against capitalism, they're anti-Israel, they're pro-Hamas, they're absolute garbage, and anyone with half a brain could see it, and at least of all a conservative.
I don't think people could see it. You see, I wrote an article around that time, I think it might have even predated yours, Nick, in which I said that there were problems with Black Lives Matter, and that these were the things they supported, but I had to really search for that and find it and think about it, and a lot of people don't have time for that, do they?
Well, I was against it, and we discussed it at my Ku Klux Klan meeting.
Right.
Wait. No. That was a joke.
They know that was a joke.
So let them know. You got a question.
I didn't know. I thought it was real. I thought it was finding the real Lewis.
Anyway, I'm a Jew.
So you've got yes, you're Jewish.
I've got the most important point, which says this woman is wrong. She actually worked for Hillary Clinton's campain.
So she knew.
Hillary Clinton.
Do you know what though? Can I just come back to this point? There was a lot of pressure on people.
There was a lot of pressure, but it's still not forgivable to me. The one thing would be forgivable is thinking that George Floyd was murdered, which we now know is not true. Most people haven't caught up to that one yet. But
well, David Chauvin was committed.
The autopsy shows that it wasn't actually murder. That it wasn't due to pressure on the neck or anything like that.
But he was found guilty of murder in a court.
I know, but OK. Yeah, you make sure we say that, yeah.
Well, it's true.
But what is a Conservative MP doing working for Hillary Clinton, who is the Democratic Antichrist?
All I will say about this, you know, at the time, a friend of mine, an actor, was told by her agent that unless she put the Black Lives Matter black square on her social media, she'd never get cast again. So there's a lot of pressure on people.
Yes, but they're not Conservative Party
She's not a Conservative Party MP.
They're just actors in a woke industry, who are scared.
OK, all right, fair enough. OK, let's look at this next one. Nick, about translations.
Yeah, this is Joe Biden's translator to filter out any gaffes made during meeting with Xi Jinping. This is amazing, really. So, because we have a president of the US who can't be trusted to talk because he might cause World War III, they're saying, look, luckily there'll be a translator who hopefully won't translate the gaffes, and they're not going to have one-on-one meetings. And the spokesman here has added...
Who's saying this? Someone from an insider at the White House?
Yeah.
That's incredible. Because
this comes from intelligence analyst Kevin...
OK.
Yeah, I can't even say his name.
But what they're suggesting is that the translator effectively supersedes the president insofar as the translator could say anything in that meeting.
Yeah.
If they want.
That's a risk.
There have been comedy sketches exactly like that.
They have, haven't there?
But my favourite bit, sorry, just very quickly, is when he says, it's worth noting that President Biden has performed well when he's had time to focus on a particular event. I mean, how pathetic.
You know, I feel bad. I do feel bad for him. You know, he's obviously, in a stage of cognitive decline. But the Democrats won't admit it, and that puts him in a really bad position.
Yeah.
And he's prone to gaffes as a result. No, but there are high stakes, aren't there? If he's having a conversation with these major world leaders, actually, all of a sudden, those gaffes become serious.
And so what's ridiculous about this story is, and Xi doesn't have a translator there for him.
Oh, well, no, he'll have a translator as well, but he won't be filtering out the gaffes. I think if a translator tried to do that to the Chinese president, they would get in trouble. Let's put it that way.
No, the translator, the Chinese translator, would say the gaffes that what's his name was saying.
Do you think that? I mean, some of the gaffes that Biden has done have been. Didn't he refer to Zelensky as Vladimir? I think
it makes sense. He's got entire countries wrong. He said did he say Iran when he meant? Ukraine,
he's
one
done
of those
stuff like that. He called on a woman who died a few months before in a meeting.
He called Hamas the other team. Was a
is that right?
A fun one.
Yes.
Yeah, but
he mixed up the black and tans with the All Blacks.
But this is not the point. The point is that the Democrats would rather have a horrible Joe Biden than
I don't think they want him. I don't think he wanted to run for a second term.
They don't want him, but if it's a choice between Joe Biden and any Republican, they would vote for Joe Biden.
OK, well,
that is true.
That is true.
That could be true. We're going to move on to The Sun now. And Lewis, China's internet is so fast. They're watching this show on YouTube 3 minutes ago.
Well, actually, the answer is no, because they wouldn't be watching this show, because it's a police state, much like what the British government is trying to do with us here in this country, or the British deep state. China launches, quote, world's fastest internet, 3 times faster than the best U.S. tech that can download 150
Why are they
films
so
a
much
second.
better at this than everyone else?
They're not. They just made an announcement. We don't know if it's true, and it's not really that much faster.
What?
No, it's only 3 times faster. Remember when the internet was 28 bits a second or something?
Oh, I remember you'd hear that dialing tone, and you were there for 10 minutes trying to order a Domino's.
And now, so it goes up. Now my internet is like 150, and so it says it's going to be 1.2 terabytes, which is basically about.
No, that's impressive. They were saying that we weren't going to reach that till 2025.
Well, do you know what? You still need something to download on it, and this is a police state, so you're not going to get. There's no point in having it.
Any thoughts, Nick?
One potential answer as to how they're so much better could be that they can just work their people to death until they jump into those net things. You know, they don't have human rights. But the good thing is, hopefully, David Cameron will get a look at this technology and bring it back here. Yeah. He's big pals with the old
There we go. That's a positive note.
The Chinese, we should not be afraid of the Chinese.
I'm not afraid of the Chinese.
OK? From what I know about the Chinese,
he's afraid of what you're going to say on the show.
They're really bad at technology. They're good at the low-level stuff. They are not good at the high-level stuff. All these big chips, these AI chips, they're all made in Taiwan, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Or we make them.
Conductors.
They can't do that. That's why if we boycott them, they are DEAD.
We are not going to be able to boycott China. We're too tied in there, I'm afraid. But anyway, finishing this section with The Guardian. Nick, is this why the Tooth Fairy has taken out a second job?
Nice. Yeah, it's fewer children in England having teeth out since sugar tax began, study finds. And this is bad news because it means they're going to start the meat tax. They'll be taxing everything. But basically, the number of children aged 18 and under going to hospital to have teeth extracted has fallen 12% since the sugar tax came in April 2018.
Right. So it's working.
It's working, but there's no improvement amongst 10 to 14-year-olds or 15 to 18-year-olds. So is it really working, or is this just Big anti-sugar.
I am very... I know Lewis has a lot of thoughts about sugar, which he will no doubt bore us with in a moment. But the point about this is that I am concerned about the nanny state idea. I'm concerned about the idea that the government is sort of saying what we should and shouldn't be eating, what companies should and should be putting in their products.
Because
shouldn't we have the choice?
Yeah, we should have the choice. I'm with you. We should have the choice.
If I want to eat a bag of sugar every morning for breakfast, I should be able to do that.
But you know what? What's crazy about this is people think of sugar as only the white sugar that you scoop into the tea.
No, it's everywhere.
It's fructose.
No, that's... white sugar is half fructose, half sucrose.
Yes.
But what is sugar? Sugar is all carbs are sugar. They're chains of sugar. Starches are chains of sugar.
Well, they're not taxing that, are they?
No, they're not. And the proof that there's been no improvement detected among 10 to 18-year-olds says that probably what it is that young people are getting a lot of their calories from sugar. They were getting a lot of it, and sugar causes all cavities. I have stopped brushing my teeth. I don't brush my teeth anymore. You don't need to if you go on an all-meat diet.
Right, terrible advice from Lewis Schaefer. Please ignore it. OK, so just one more section to go, and when we're going to be talking about the word of the year, the film of the year, and the dating trend of the year. See you in a moment.
Ooh. Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GBNews.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Thursday's newspapers. And am I really seeing this story in The Guardian, Lewis?
Well, it's a big word. This says hallucinate, chosen as Cambridge Dictionary's word of the year. I don't know who owned Cambridge Dictionary, whether that's just based on a place or whether the university owns it, like Oxford University. I don't know. But it said they have to pick a word. And they didn't want to pick AI because it's so boring. And they didn't want to pick CPT and whatever. So they picked hallucinate. hallucinate because it's the...
what is it?
It's hallucinate is a feeling, a crazy... When you hallucinate stuff, it just is all weird stuff.
No, I know what hallucinate means,
Yeah.
but I think they mean in the context of ChatGTP.
Well, it means they chose it because it's a vivid psychological verb.
No, they're talking about AI, but they're saying that when ChatGTP generates text, it sometimes hallucinates and therefore gives false information. That's what they mean.
Yeah, because what do they call it? Where you're reifying the. What does it mean when you're making it a person? You're personifying. You're
or anthropomorphizing.
Anthropomorphize. Right. This is what they're trying to do. Like that other article. We had an article that said that aliens are landing, are already here. What are the aliens?
Okay, Lewis didn't read this, did he? Okay,
I did.
Nick, what's
it's what
the
you
deal
said,
here?
Andrew. Yeah, it's hallucinate. It's when. Well, I've just read the same as you. It's when it generates text that mimics human writing, hallucinates, and thus produces false information.
But when they do this, like so, whenever Cambridge Dictionary or Oxford Dictionary chooses a word of the year, it's always hyper-politicised. Do you remember they chose youthquake as the word of the year one year, and of course that everyone's forgotten about that word. No one knows what it means. They chose they as a singular pronoun as word of the year a couple of years ago. So they're very politicised. So why are they pushing ChatGTP? Is it because it's hyper woke and ideologically driven?
They're trying to push AI on us, Andrew. That's what it's all about.
No, or it could be they're a clickbait. They want clickbait, so they want a word.
Of course they do.
And they got us to talk about it.
It's a non-story.
It's a non-story.
Yeah, who would want clickbait or slogans or anything like that? Let's move on to the Times now. The Times, a new Waterloo. Nick, what's this?
This is French critics pour scorn on Ridley Scott's clumsy Napoleon. And of course they do. That's what French critics do, especially about stuff involving France that they don't like. And it says it's been panned as an Anglo-Saxon caricature that plays fast and loose with history. In other words, a movie. And that's what they are. That's what we want. That's what Hollywood movies are.
French critics do pour scorn. They do
love
nothing
it.
but pour
They
scorn.
love it. With
French
smoking,
critics, French
wearing
people.
A
That's what French
jumper.
people do, is they pour scorn.
What do you think about this, Lewis? I mean, they're complaining that Ridley Scott's new film, Napoleon...
Lewis, and 5 minutes of garbage. I say one thing, it's back to Lewis for 5 minutes of Ku Klux Klan stuff.
It won't be garbage, Nick, because I've got a feeling that the next thing he's going to say is going to be so insightful, you'll be eating your words.
I want to see the minutes ratio of who spoke on this show. I'm the straight man, just says corrections now. We like the royal family.
No,
that is factually untrue. And he rants for 5 minutes about quasi-racist stuff.
Because they don't want what's on the Patrick Christie show on this show. We're giving them something new.
Listen,
You're right.
Lewis,
It's true.
Napoleon. Do you think it's a problem that the film Napoleon is not historically accurate, as these French critics claim?
Well, Napoleon was one of those films that I could have been in if they had chosen me, but it was too far away. They were filming it up in
You were never going to be in Napoleon.
Yes, they were filming it for like months and years. And
all right, Nick, since you're upset, I'll come back to you about this. Do you not think, though, that there is a case here, that if you misrepresent history in Hollywood, that is the thing that sticks? People start saying, oh, that did happen, didn't it, because I saw the film of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff that bothers me is when they do ridiculous casting, you know, people who are obviously a certain race are another race. But when it's like certain key scenes to make them a bit more exciting, I think that's okay. I like Ridley Scott's defence, where he dismissed the critics and said, my answer to them is, how do you know? Were you there? Which is an incredible defence. For all of history, that works.
For instance, in Braveheart, William Wallace is depicted as having sex with Edward II's wife.
And being Australian.
But Edward II's wife was 10 years old at the time, so let's hope that didn't happen.
Right.
But, you know, don't you
it's
think...
a film about an Australian paedophile.
Well, I mean, that's the point. Is that what it is? Is that what the film is about?
Well, this is what film is. You know, make your own films. I remember seeing the film about the Warsaw Ghetto, where they made it seem like I don't want to talk about it because it's horrible.
Well, I'm glad you raised it and then immediately stopped talking about it. Really useful, Lewis.
Polish fans.
Do you remember we've talked about self-censorship? Remember we've talked about the filter.
Just censorship.
The filter in your head.
I just did it.
You didn't do it. You spoke about it and then you did it.
You filtered yourself at the only time you shouldn't have.
Yes.
When you've just raised something you want to talk about.
Well, let the people look up that film about the Warsaw Ghetto.
Lewis, we're going to talk about this afterwards. Anyway, the Metro next. What's this? Lewis, you know a lot about age-inappropriate relationships, don't you? Now, what's the story? What's this story about?
What do you mean by that?
Well, because it's a story about the age gap. That's why I'm asking you.
Why do you think I would know something about it?
I'm not talking about you. Don't be so paranoid. I'm not talking about you and your relationship. Although she is young. She's a lot younger than you, isn't she? No, look, you raised it. I didn't want to talk about your private life, Lewis. You've made it about you.
Do you know what? Do you know what, Andrew?
What are you doing now?
I actually got you a tie. I brought you a tie.
Yeah?
For you.
Well, are you not going to give me that now? You're going to withhold your gift? Because you're grumpy about...
Let him... You can talk. You do this story.
Nick,
Yes.
Age-inappropriate relationships.
It's age-gap relationships are set to be 2024's biggest dating trend. And it's nothing to do with Lewis, but, you know, it's saying that basically people are loosening up on the idea that age is a big problem and they're more open to different age relationships. Although I'm sure men will still get hammered. You know, everyone's saying Leonardo DiCaprio is a monster because he goes out with 25-year-olds. But partly it's economic realities, I think. People are like, oh, I need someone with money. That's my take. But also, annoyingly, women are less open to someone with differing political views. And if you've ever been on the apps, they're all lefties. So then you're in trouble straight away for that. But yeah, it's about, and they're saying women are rebelling against constant self-improvement. So basically, an overweight lefty is what you're going to get.
So explain this to me, Lewis, because I don't understand why it's anyone's business. If two consenting adults are in a relationship, so what if there's a 20-year age gap? It's got nothing to do with me.
It's not immoral.
No, it's not. What's the age gap in your relationship, Lewis, out of interest? It's considerable. Anyway, thanks for the tie. Right, we're going to move on now to this next story. India is a good place to be an alcoholic man in this time story, Nick.
Yes. Most living organ donors in India are women giving kidneys to men. What a breath of fresh air. So this is about how nearly all the donors are women giving to men. Even when your brother's the perfect match, they go to the wife instead. And it's basically the patriarchy alive and well in India.
No.
What? I mean, and they're saying, the Times saying, inequality, gender inequality affects all areas of life. Maybe these women are just nice and like men and want to give them kidneys.
No, that's not the reason. You've got your time. Give a reason. There's a legitimate reason why the women give the kidneys.
Why? What is the reason?
Because if the man gives the kidneys, he's out of work, he can't make any money, and if he dies, there's no more money for the family, and he dies.
You only need one kidney, though, don't you?
Yeah, no, the surgery, it can kill people, and you know, it's India, I don't know how the medical thing is there, but this is the thing. They don't want to risk the men's life because the men bring home the money. I'm sorry, women are fantastic.
So this is, in fact, the patriarchy in action.
It's not the patriarchy, it's common sense, because if the man dies, the entire family starves. If the woman dies, then just the woman dies.
Yeah, it says the feeling is that if something happens to the woman, it's not so bad. It's kind of a Lewis Schaefer type opinion.
Yeah, it isn't. I just said it. If the man dies, the entire family dies.
No, I think Lewis is desperately trying to make a sensible point here, and we're not taking him seriously. So actually, we should be nicer to him for once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you like your tie?
I do like the tie, Lewis.
Show the people.
It's made from.
There it is.
It's made from meat. Does that?
I'm going to Lewis. I tell you what. I will wear that on Free Speech Nation this Sunday. Will that make you happy?
Yeah.
There we go. There we go. All right. So we've got time for quickly one more story. This is the Mirror, and for whom does the bell toll, Lewis?
Yes. Somebody. Church bells have been rung every hour for 200+ years, silenced after noise complaints. This is in the Mirror. And somebody made a complaint about church bells. And they said to the church, you can't do the church bells anymore because, and this is in Scotland, but the truth is it's an SNP-run council.
Yeah. Well, and they're loud and annoying, but Nick, it's tradition. And it's religion.
Tricky, because it's two things I care about. I care about tradition and churches and church bells, but I also care about noise.
You hate noise,
Yes,
don't you?
It's a real problem for me, this one.
Yes.
Because they were ringing them from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and that does seem a bit unreasonable. I mean,
actually, that is
I'm awake. I'm awake
they were ringing
working
all
at that time,
day long, including 11.
Yeah, including. I'm saying including. Those are the hours that would be most objectionable if you were trying to sleep, although I sleep much later.
But they wanted to cancel the entire
I'm against
thing.
everything.
Well, the show is nearly over, unfortunately, but let's take another quick look at Thursday's front pages before we go. The Guardian is leading with PM vows to push through Rwanda plan after court rules it unlawful. The Telegraph has that same story. PM will use emergency law to start Rwanda flights. The Mirror has Is Nothing Sacred. That's a new book about the royal family. The Express, PM fights back. We will deport migrants. Financial Times is also running with that story. Defiant Sunak vows to change law as top court strikes down Rwanda policy. And the Daily Star, Snowvember, something to do with snow in November, I gather from the headline. That's all we've got time for tonight. Thank you ever so much to my wonderful guests, Lewis Schaefer and Nick Dixon. Lewis there holding his calendar. We're back tomorrow at 11 with Stephen Allen, Paul Cox and Lewis wrecking it. And if you're watching the 5am repeat, stay tuned for breakfast.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And a very, very good evening. Yes, it's 7 o'clock, it's Farage, but I am Richard Tice. And another massive day in British politics, because there is like double trouble. Yes, the Conservative Party, Conservative government, not happy with the Supreme Court ruling that the Rwanda scheme is unlawful. As we speak, there is huge marches, completely out of control going on around Parliament Square, flares being fired, and problems for the Labour Party, because there is a big vote, a ceasefire vote in the Commons later that could give real trouble to Keir Starmer, possibly even resignations. We've got great guests, huge show, but first of all, it's the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Richard, thank you and good evening to you. Well, the top story tonight, the Prime Minister says he will introduce emergency legislation to deem Rwanda a safe country and prevent any legal challenges in future. It comes after the Supreme Court this morning ruled the government's Rwanda plan is unlawful. Rishi Sunak has said he doesn't agree with the ruling, but that he respects it. Mr Sunak also saying the European Court of Human Rights would still be able to intervene in any new treaty that's organised with Kigali, but they won't be able to block flights to Rwanda. He says he'll do all he can to bring fundamental change to the country.
We are a reasonable government, and this is a reasonable country. But the British people's patience can only be stretched so thin, and they expect the boats to be stopped. That is why I made it one of my 5 priorities. And whatever our critics might say, we are making progress. Because the Rwanda scheme is only one part of our strategy. Last December, the number entering the UK illegally in small boats had more than quadrupled in just 2 years.
Well, tonight in the House of Commons, it's going to be a busy evening. The Labour leader's amendment to the King's Speech debate calling for humanitarian pauses in the fighting in Gaza will shortly be debated in the House of Commons. Just a few moments ago, Shadow Women and Equalities Minister Yasmin Qureshi resigned, saying she would vote for an immediate ceasefire if pushed. Let's take you live now to our political correspondent, Catherine Foster, who's standing by with more information. Catherine, what's happening in the House of Commons tonight?
Yes, so a real challenge to Keir Starmer's authority this evening. MPs are currently voting on the Labour amendment, which calls for humanitarian pauses, but not a ceasefire. MPs have been told that they must vote for that, but they must not vote for the next amendment MPs will be voting on shortly. That is brought forward by the SNP explicitly for a ceasefire. Now, there's many people within the Labour Party, including potentially a dozen or so shadow frontbenchers who desperately want to support calls for a ceasefire. And as we've just heard, Yasmin Qureshi has just resigned from her shadow frontbench role, Women and Equalities Minister, so that she can vote for a ceasefire. I expect that she will be the first of several resignations and potentially sackings when the results come in.
Catherine Foster, thanks very much. We will, of course, be following that closely here on GB News throughout the evening, and there'll be full analysis in the programme coming up after this bulletin. Now, news here at home. 2 12-year-old boys have been arrested on suspicion of murder of a 19-year-old after he was stabbed to death in Wolverhampton. 19-year-old Sean Sisahai was attacked on the Laburnham Road area on Monday night. A number of police vehicles and officers remain at the scene, and West Midlands Police is telling us that 2 boys were arrested last night at their home addresses. They remain in custody. The government says it's delivered on its pledge to halve inflation, with price rises slowing down at the fastest rate in 2 years. The latest data shows inflation was 4.6% in October, down from 6.7% in September. A fall in energy costs and house prices has helped to reduce that figure, which is still above the Bank of England's 2% target. That's the news for now. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Well, a very good evening to Farage. And yes, I'm Richard Tyson. We've got an absolutely outstanding hour ahead. It's frankly hard to keep up with what is going on at the moment. The last 3 days have been huge, seismic in British politics. But today, the Supreme Court ruled the Rwanda scheme that the government had absolutely pinned all their hopes on. The Supreme Court ruled that, no, it is unlawful. And it's important to examine what they've actually said and what I think are some serious contradictions before we get to our first guest. the Supreme Court, they've said that actually, in the light of the evidence which I've summarised, the Court of Appeal concluded there are such grounds to make it unlawful. Absolutely extraordinary, saying here that there are good grounds for thinking asylum seekers are going to be at risk in Rwanda, that it is not a safe country. That's what the Supreme Court have ruled. They were relying on UNHCR evidence. That's the UN Refugee Agency. Well, you might think that's all very proper. We should trust them. No problem at all. The Rwanda government immediately issued a stinging rebuke of this judgment. They said that the Supreme Court had relied on extreme and speculative concerns based on hypocritical criticisms by the UNHCR, which has on numerous occasions expressed its appreciation of Rwanda's inclusive refugee policies, qualifying them as exemplary. What's going on here? We've got the Supreme Court saying the country's not safe for asylum seekers, and yet we've got Rwandan government saying the UNHCR says they've been exemplary. So that's the second bit. I have here a 29-page report from the UNHCR dated April 2023. I've read it. It's a little bit dry, but I have to tell you, there is no criticism whatsoever of the Rwandan government in the way that they are dealing with over 100,000 asylum seekers. Are you confused? I am. Who's telling the truth on this? It's extraordinary. You might think it's an establishment stitch-up for all of this. So there's the conflicting evidence. What does it all actually practically mean? Well, this, folks, is when I want you to think of something you may well have at home. A magnet. Yes, have you got a big magnet at home? What is a magnet? I tell you what it is. It's a powerful attraction. It attracts things. It attracts people. That's what a magnet does. So here we've got a ruling, and there it is, a picture of a magnet flying above the white cliffs of Dover. And guess what it's going to do? I think it's going to pull more illegal migrants across the English Channel, because now they know that the government's big deterrent scheme, the Rwanda scheme, it's in the bin. It's finished, gone. It's not exactly a deterrent now, is it? The second big pull factor, which has emerged and hasn't had proper scrutiny, is that if you're an asylum seeker and you've been here for a year, good news, folks. Yes, you can get a work permit, you can go to work. You might say there's a labour shortage, that might be a good thing. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. But it's the magnet factor, isn't it? It's the pull. We've got a Home Office that doesn't believe in controlling our borders, and we've got over 170,000 people waiting a decision. Many of them have been waiting over 2 years. So if you come across the Channel, there's no deterrent, you're not going to Rwanda, and there's every chance you'll be here for a year, and therefore you'll be able to work. Yes, good news, you will pay a bit of tax if you've got a decent job, you're above the threshold. But you see what I mean? It's the magnet factor. It's the pull factor. And that, folks, is my big question to you. I want your views on this, of course. Will this ruling, will it make illegal migration worse? Email me, farage@gbnews.com, or you can tweet us using the hashtag, I'm so sorry, you must X us. We'll never get used to that, will we? Farage on GB News. Well, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by two great guests, Alexander Downer, former advisor to the UK government and a former foreign minister in Australia. A very warm welcome to you, Alexander. And, of course, David Maddox from the Daily Express, political editor online. Alexander, I'm going to come to you first. Have you ever seen in a government, in a developed nation, a G7 nation, such political chaos?
Well, I'm not sure that I can easily measure different chaoses in different governments. All governments do wrestle with chaos, and one of the things I would say is if the government changes here next year, the new government will still, from time to time, look a bit chaotic. So I think the issue here, though, is that the Rwanda plan can work. But what the Supreme Court has concluded, I mean, whether one agrees with the Supreme Court or not, that the Rwandan officials who are assessing the refugee claims may not be proficient at doing it.
So they've made their ruling, but where's the government gone wrong here to end up, frankly, to most folk at home, in such a pickle?
Well, this is quite a detail, but the government has a memorandum of understanding with the Rwandan government over how the Rwandans themselves will deal with making an assessment of whether someone's a refugee or whether they're not. So if they're not a refugee, they should be sent back to their home. But if somebody has a genuine fear of persecution back in their home, you're supposed to accept them as a refugee.
But it's not a great look, is it, Alexander? Apparently we've paid and actually already sent, give or take, 140 million quid of taxpayers' cash to Rwanda. The scheme's now in the bin, and the Prime Minister's going to try and re-legislate.
Yeah.
And if you're the president of Rwanda, I'm pretty sure that you feel you've got a bit of negotiating leverage. I mean, you're going to ask for the chequebook to be reopened.
If I were the president, President Kagame is his name, if I was President Kagame, I would be pretty annoyed with the Supreme Court, I suppose. I wouldn't agree with the judgment, which is that the Supreme Court's judgment is that the Rwandan officials may not be competent. That's, in effect, what it's saying. So I wouldn't be happy with that. On the other hand, I think there is an agreement to be made between the British government and the...
Which is going to cost us more, frankly.
I'm not sure about costing more. I think it's a small amendment that may involve British officials also working with the Rwandan officials in making the assessments. And that may actually fix the problem. So I don't think it's a problem beyond repair.
And what's your sort of thoughts about other European nations that are now looking at offshoring? You've got Germany looking at it. You've got, I think, France looking at it. You've got Italy looking at it.
Denmark.
They're all looking at this. So actually, in a sense, we've led the way. We've now been basically told thanks but no thanks by the Supreme Court. Other governments are leading the way. They may well be looking to Rwanda. I mean, Rwanda could earn fortunes out of this.
Yeah. Well, by the way, Australia led the way.
Sorry,
my country
as you often always do. You led the way in stopping the boats.
We sometimes do and we sometimes don't, but we certainly did on this. And it has stopped the boats. It's been incredibly effective. And we have been encouraging the British government to adopt this Rwandan scheme. I mean, not necessarily Rwanda, but Rwanda will do. Because what it will do is destroy the business model of the people smugglers, of the organised...
Because you had an offshore processing in an island, in Nauru, that's right.
Yeah.
But you also had a pushback policy. So we've only done like a third of it, because we haven't got the pushback policy.
Hard to do a pushback policy when you don't have international waters between the UK and France.
Yeah, I've got the answer to that.
That is a problem.
But it's
a legal problem, and you have to.
And I've got the legal answer because I've read the treaties. That's absolutely sure. But finally, Alexander, does the government make this? I mean, do you think they can get through this in the next few months, or do you think essentially this is now done through into the next general election here in the UK?
I think the risk for them. I mean, they can make an agreement with the Rwandans, and they can put emergency legislation through the Parliament, and they should be able to do that quickly. However, there will be a whole lot of attempts subsequently to try to use the courts to overturn the policy yet again. So they'll have to be wary of that.
Oh, if only I was a lawyer. Think how rich we'd all get if we were lawyers on this. Yeah. Alexander Downer, thank you so much indeed for joining me with your thoughts and your experience. You know what works. Australia, once again, leading the way, as regrettably sometimes they do, with the cricket. Anyway, thank you, Alexander, for that. I'm going to turn now to David Maddox from the Daily Express, political editor online. David, this is not good for the Conservative government, is it, at all? I mean, it just looks chaotic. They've hung their hat on this for months and months and months. The Prime Minister didn't think he needed a plan B. He was told by Suella Braverman he should have a plan B. She's right, isn't she?
She is, and that letter she wrote to him yesterday was absolutely devastating because it went through step by step what she'd told him, the agreements they'd made, the duplicitousness, allegedly, of his relationship with her as Home Secretary. And now they're at a point where it's failed. And yes, they can bring in emergency legislation, but it'll just start the clock again on all these court hearings. I mean, look how long it took us to get to this point.
Exactly, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? The lawyers will just be licking their lips, huge sums of money, once again, including lots of taxpayers' money, just appealing and taking it all the way to the Supreme Court. Do you think they could get this emergency legislation through the House of Lords in time? And of course, this legislation wasn't in the King's speech, was it?
No, it wasn't, and of course the Lords would argue it wasn't in the manifesto either. And we know from previous attempts to get this sort of legislation through that the Lords fight tooth and nail. The unelected Lords, undemocratic Lords, fight tooth and nail to stop it. They are in many ways the people smugglers' best friends. They are the people upholding their business.
So the Conservative government is in real trouble. What did you think, just almost finally, of Starmer's performance at PMQs today? He had so many open goals. Did he score any?
I thought he scored a lot. I mean, partly because Rishi Sunak went back on the old chestnut of Jeremy Corbyn, and it ain't working anymore because, a good many of his MPs are no longer cheering when he says it because they're so angry. I have to say that Starmer, I thought, made a really important point. He said Sunak had promised to stop the boats by the end of the year. He clearly hasn't. He won't have stopped the boats before the next election. And as Sunak says, patience is wearing thin.
But where is the pressure on Starmer for his own policy to stop the boats, given that essentially he's voted against all of the government's policies on stopping the boats? Where does that pressure grow?
I think that becomes as we come nearer to an election. But the problem the Conservatives had, and it's something you've often said, is that they have singularly failed to deliver on this policy. They've singularly failed to stop the boats. OK, it's 30% down, but that could have been bad weather. It could have been, all sorts of things.
All sorts of things.
It's still going on.
Absolutely. David Maddox, thank you so much indeed. Serious political trouble for the Conservative government at the moment. So, there we are. After the break, I'm going to be talking to two different lawyers about the complications of the government trying to get this through. Will it work? Won't it? Who's going to do what? Who's going to adopt what position? Don't go anywhere. It's Farage here on GB News.
Earlier with Eamon and Isabel.
How do you solve a problem like Suella?
Suella Braverman's excoriating letter, ripping Sunak apart. But we all know Sunak is weak. We've all seen him equivocate. We've all seen him make promises and turn his back on them.
For me, a refugee wasn't a word that I chose. It was a word that was given to me. But for me, just realise the people and the reasonings behind those numbers when you're making those decisions.
And this is a policy that Suella has championed, and now all of a sudden she's saying, covering all bases, throwing her toys out the pram like a little child, her letter was, blaming Rishi.
Let's have a look at his sporting lookalike, see if you can guess who this is. Oh, it is you! Oh, there he is, there he is.
But that's not me, that's Elvis. Breakfast with Eamon
And Isabel.
Monday to Thursday
From 6 a.m.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akwe, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage here on GB News. Well, before the break, I asked you, will this make illegal immigration worse? It's almost the magnet factor. That was my question to you. Barbara, she's absolutely furious. Barbara says, of course there will be more. It's outrageous. Gordon says, increase, there'll be no stopping them now, no deterrent, and get a job, quids in, mate. There we are. What does Kate say? Kate says, we look like weak idiots and they know it. So there you are, pretty clear, no doubt about that from some of our listeners and viewers. Well, I'm delighted now to explore the legal detail about this, because it's important. The Prime Minister's made some serious pledges today. I'm joined by Paul Turner, immigration lawyer, and Richard Bartram, a senior immigration solicitor. I'm surrounded by lawyers. Can't tease you because you know so much. I'm going to come to you, Paul. This is really significant. Were you surprised by the Supreme Court's ruling today?
Not at all.
Not at all.
As night follows day, it was bound to happen.
OK.
The first decision was questionable. The Court of Appeal decision was predictable, and today was pretty much inevitable.
Absolutely true. So you weren't surprised at all. Richard, you actually are a solicitor. You've worked in the Supreme Court. I think you still do work around it.
I do, indeed.
So were you surprised by it?
Well, not at all. The issue of third country has been going on since 2004. That's almost 20 years. The same mistakes are made by the Secretary of State 20 years ago as are being made now. As my colleague said, as night follows day, this was entirely predictable. A policy set up in 2020, September, during lockdown by the Cabinet Committee, initially rejected by the Foreign Office, becomes law.
So here we are, folks. We've got 2 senior lawyers. They know their onions. Neither of them are at all surprised by this ruling. And yet the Prime Minister decided to ignore his Home Secretary's advice and not have a plan B for this. So he's now rushed out his plan B. I'd be fascinated with your thoughts, Richard, as to even if he gets this legislation through, and that will obviously take some time to go through the parliamentary process, even when he does that, do you think there will therefore then be appeal after appeal to the respective
I don't think there'll be appeal after appeal. As I understand it, the law is going to be changed in some way, which we don't yet know, to deem Rwanda a safe country. Well, Parliament, being sovereign, can pass any law it likes. It can pass a law declaring foxes are chickens. Just don't expect eggs in the morning.
Sure.
Not going to work.
OK, but if it does deem that Rwanda is a safe country, and if it gets that through, which may take some time, Is there an ability for some of the human rights lawyers to challenge that judgment by Parliament?
What the court said was that they looked at the facts as well and made a factual assessment that it wasn't. And unless the facts on the ground in Rwanda change, the Supreme Court will come to the exact same decision. They will have no choice but to do so if it's the new legislation is once again incompatible with other legal obligations. You can't have 3 legal obligations which are incompatible. That's the problem.
And so the Prime Minister, Paul, talked about a reforming process to the European Convention on Human Rights. That's what he talked about, because he knows he's still basically at risk for the rulings from the ECHR. What does that mean, and is that actually practically possible?
Well, that's, in my view, a distraction. I mean, there are 2 things that come out of that. Reforming process for the ECHR, we all know that Article 39 indications are essentially, they're not mandatory. The UK government decides to go along with them. But more importantly, banging on about the ECHR panders to the right wing of the Conservative Party. But if one reads the decision of the Supreme Court, it's not the ECHR that is effectively prevented removal, it is the United Kingdom's obligations under the Refugee Convention. And no one is suggesting for a moment that they're repealed or overlooked. And as to this emergency legislation, again, that might sound tremendously gung-ho and we're going to get something done. But they're going to have to look at not only the ECHR, but also the Refugee Convention, and about 3 at the very least domestic statutes which incorporate the Refugee Convention.
But in theory, as Richard was saying, Parliament is sovereign. It can pass a law. It could pass a law, what I think Suella Braverman was called notwithstanding clauses, notwithstanding all of those points you've just referred to. If Parliament was to pass that law, do you think that it could be challenged by other groups in the Court of Appeal all the way back up to the Supreme Court, and so the merry-go-round goes on?
Well, merry-go-round's not the right word, because we've gone in a linear process as opposed to relitigating the same matter.
My listeners and viewers will call this a merry-go-round, let me tell you.
I'm sure they will, but in essence, as Richard's indicated, Parliament could legislate that the firstborn children are killed. I wonder if the UK courts would endorse that or would allow it to happen. The fact of the matter is, I think I looked at what the Prime Minister said, and it was essentially that they were going to pass a law that said Rwanda was safe. They can say the tide's not going to come in, but if it comes in, they're still going to get their feet wet.
So what you're actually saying, and this is really important, everyone, what I think both of you are saying is that even if the Prime Minister gets this legislation through in a rapid time frame, it's still going to be challenged. That's the bottom line, isn't it?
Unless the situation in Rwanda changes dramatically.
You'd agree with that?
Oh, yes, but I think we also need to consider the whys. One might have an opinion that the refugee system should be reformed. There are a number of opinions and other possibilities. But to spend hundreds of millions of pounds to remove 200, perhaps, people, when there are some 45,000 arrived last year, I'm not a betting man, but that's a fraction of a percent. Yes. That's no deterrent. That doesn't bust the smugglers' traffickers' business model.
Hit the nail on the head, Richard. It was never a deterrent.
If I was I'm not a smuggler. If I was a smuggler, it wouldn't dent my business model, and that's the evil that we're trying to prevent here.
And OK, and so you said if you were a smuggler, Paul, putting words in your mouth, if you were a migrant looking to come across the channel, would that be a deterrent to you? If given everything that you've known, would that be a deterrent, or would you still take
the words don't need to come out of my mouth. They have actually, I think I read somewhere that people actually interviewed people and told them about this policy and said, is that going to stop you coming? And their answer was no. And it's, I think Richard touched upon this. No studies have been carried out as to whether this is going to work. It may work in the minds of certain people, but there's no evidence. No one's actually thought, is this going to work? They could speak to the migrants. But they haven't.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, you've been fantastic. Paul and Richard, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
We've got an extraordinary thing. We've actually got a consensus among 2 lawyers that basically this isn't going to work. It's not going to stop. It's not going to be a deterrent. And the truth is, it's going to be challenged. Coming up, we're going to speak to Patrick Christys. But first, we're going to go back to Polly Middlehurst with some interesting, important news.
Here I am. Yes, we do indeed have some important news coming to you from the Commons this evening. There were two important votes taking place this evening concerning events in Gaza. Sir Keir Starmer indeed facing a Labour rebellion as MPs decided that they may defy the party line on Gaza. Sir Keir said there should have been longer pauses in the fighting to allow humanitarian aid in. That was voted upon. 290 to 183 with a majority of 107 to reject Labour's King's Speech amendment. But then, of course, the SNP had tabled that amendment on the King's Speech, demanding a complete ceasefire. We've seen as well the crowds outside Westminster supporting that action. Labour MPs were ordered to abstain. There was a 3-line whip on this. That's the strictest instruction that a leader of a political party can give to his members. If Labour members didn't abstain, they risked losing their place in the shadow cabinet. They could either resign or get sacked. So what's happened? Let's just tell you. Well, now there has been a vote on what should happen in Gaza. Should there be a ceasefire or not? Yes, say 125. No, say 293, with a majority of 168. Let's cross live to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who can give us some analysis on that. Our apologies. Catherine is just gathering some information for us, and we'll be able to cross to her later. Let's get some analysis on those events in the House of Commons now as I hand you back to Richard Tice.
Thank you so much. To analyse these important votes, the impact of them on the Labour Party later on. But so much to do. Coming up after the break, we're going to be speaking to our presenter, GBNews presenter Patrick Christys. He was verbally abused this evening. All he was doing was just filming a nice protest. More of that in just a moment.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akweer, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Well, welcome back to Farage on another extraordinary day in British politics. First of all, before we go to Patrick, we're just going to look at some of the comments from the protesters that Ray Addison, our reporter, spoke to down at the demonstration, because this is significant. Let's just take a listen.
Vote for a ceasefire?
More than a ceasefire, they need to solve the problem. The problem was started 75 years ago when Israel was founded.
What's your view on Hamas? Are you pro-Hamas?
I'm not going to talk about Hamas. People have got a right to resist.
What are you calling on MPs to do?
Absolute ceasefire, immediately. Yeah, there's nothing else that can be done in my mind.
What's your view on Hamas?
I don't condone the killing. I don't condone the violence on either side. I think they're a group that has been forced to commit atrocities, and that's what they are, atrocities. But they've been suffering abominations for years and years and years, decades, before I was born, long before I was born.
Are you calling for violence to stop on both sides, from Hamas and from Israel?
Yes, ideally yes, but we believe, most people here, we believe that Israel is causing most violence. That's not to say that Hamas is not causing any.
Why are you blocking this vehicle? 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 Don't touch me.
Israel is a terrorist state.
You don't believe that kidnapped children deserve to be returned home to their families?
Do you condemn Israel?
Do you believe kidnapped people should be returned to their families?
But do you condemn Israel?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you think that is bad, that is nothing to what you're about to hear from our own Patrick, who I'm very glad to say has made it safely just back to the studio. Patrick, where have you been? What's gone on?
Well, I was outside Parliament earlier on. I wanted to go and have a look at these demonstrations that were taking place. And what happened will shock you. We're going to play a full set of coverage of this. For anyone who thinks that there's just a fringe minority of people who attend these protests who are up to no good, who have extreme views, who are radical, who actually are full of hate, then what you're going to see later on my show between 9 and 11 p.m. tonight will completely blow the lid off that. I think I might have a little taster for you of just some of the things that took place earlier on.
I just want to know why you're here today. Go away, you're not wanted. Go away. You're absolutely not wanted. You're absolutely not wanted. Get away from here. I just want to hear. Get away from here. No, go away. You're fascist scum. You're not wanted. Really? I just want to know your views, that's all. All right, mate. Why are you here today? Sorry? Why are you here today? What do you think?
Don't talk to them. Don't talk to them.
Do you think this is like normal behaviour in a democracy?
Nobody talks to these people.
Off our streets. Why don't you believe in the freedom of
Freedom of speech.
What a GBNews. Off our streets. GBNews.
Yeah, and so the reality is, and there's a lot more of that, by the way, I was very lucky. I had a security guard with me.
You had a security guard,
I had a security
to
guard.
go on a supposedly ceasefire march. Really? How peaceful is that march?
I am under absolutely no illusions whatsoever that if he hadn't have been there, there would have been quite a lot of violence directed towards me and my cameraman. I'm very grateful for that individual being there, but you're going to have to tune in for more of that. But this is not normal, what's taking place on the streets.
This is not normal. This is not peaceful. How can these people be claiming they want peace, they want a ceasefire, when a journalist is being essentially attacked, abused? You've just heard some of it there. Do tune in at 9 o'clock to get the full monty. I mean, Patrick, this is not only is this not normal, I actually think it's disgraceful. I've been warning about this, frankly, since the first week after the atrocity. I've been proven right time after time after time. I've been abused by all the free speech, a lot of which I'm a supporter of free speech. But this is not free speech. This is violent. This is hateful, Patrick.
Racist chanting, caught on camera, OK? All sorts of horrible stuff being caught on camera. The overbearing threat of physical assault, and the police told us to get out of there.
The police told you to get out of there. Patrick, It's going to be an extraordinary show for you later. Thank heavens you're safe. Thanks very much indeed. Do watch Patrick at 9 o'clock, folks. But now I'm going to go down the line to my next guest. Alan Pincus is an Israeli diplomat and writer, for his thoughts on what he's sort of seeing there. And then I just also want to talk a little bit about the Israeli-Rwanda deal. But Alan, thank you for joining me on GB News. You've just heard Patrick Christie there. You've seen the scenes at the marches over recent weeks, culminating on the Armistice Day protests. What are your thoughts as a very experienced diplomat? You've been around the block a few times. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's disturbing. You know, it's discomforting, and it's. I have to admit, it's disappointing, because you would expect people to have some kind of a core basic knowledge of the conflict, core basic knowledge of history, core basic knowledge of what is, who the protagonists are and what Hamas stands for. Now, you take these demonstrators that you just showed in central London, well, next to Parliament, and you list to them what Hamas stands for. I doubt any of them would subscribe to anything. And, you know, the criticism of Israel is legitimate, and calling for a ceasefire is legitimate, and accusing Israel of occupation is legitimate. But some of what they're saying is ignorance of the highest
But Alan, in my view, there's no excuse for ignorance. And what we're seeing and hearing there, and it was the same on last Saturday, is that a significant percentage of these people on these demonstrations will not condemn